Hello, everyone. Welcome to TonePedia. Today, this interview is sponsored by the TubeAmp Doctor and Jensen speakers. Today, we're going to be discussing some of the most common myths around speakers, including things like speaker breakup and mismatching wattages and power outputs and these sort of things. With me today to clarify all of this is Mr. Ignazio from Jensen. You've been working for Jensen for around 22 years, apparently. Is that right?
It has been a long run, but it's a very fun one.
So one of the things we're going to be addressing is the Blackbird 40, which was announced today to the general public, and it looks outstanding. And at the end, we're going to give you the chance to win it, but it's going to be based on questions about things that we're going to be talking about throughout this interview. So do take notes because there will be a test.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So yeah, let's say today we are presenting the Jensen Blackboard 40, which in favor of camera is this little thing here. So the Jensen Blackboard 40 is a 12-inch for guitar, quite obviously, and it has been conceived like a lower power version of our flagship speaker, which is the Blackbird 100, which has been on the market for a long time and lately has been adopted by Mesa Boogie for the California Tweed series. It's their factory option. And, we kind of felt the market request for a slightly lower powered version. So we started working our way to develop something that made a sense because you just don't want to build like a smaller brother. That makes no sense. So we worked to have a pretty distinct vintage character because Jensen has a history, has an heritage. But we also wanted a speaker being able to uh, behave very good with crunch, lead, overdriven tones. So we needed to find a way to increase the strength of the magnet. The strength of the magnet is the horsepower of the speaker. It what makes the speaker being able to deliver big, powerful bass range, which is the foundation of that kind of tones for crunch to hard rock, power chords, palm muting. All of those styles need a firm and powerful response on the bass. So we worked our way to have more power, and we found actually this way uh, to increase the strength of this little magnet here, which is the Alnico magnet, to increase it by a factor of 30% more. And this really changes the way the speaker behaves. It's a unique technology that we have developed, and we are very proud of it. And I won't tell you the secret, even under torture. But what really counts at the end of the day is how the speaker sounds, and you will probably hear some samples and some videos that we have been recording, and we will be diffusing on the web. And yeah, we are very, very proud of the outcome of this. So that's the Blackboard 40. Vintage character on the top end, the kind of clarity, the kind of cleanliness that is kind of what the people wants from a Jensen voiced speaker, but has the Bose, has a lot of power in the lower range. So that's what we came out with.
One of the things you said to me when we were talking about this yesterday was um, the speakers haven't really changed a dramatic amount over the last like 100 years or 80 years or whatever. And this new tech that you've put in, this top secret tech that I don't even know about this, and we were talking off camera about it. It really makes this really intriguing for me, and I'm sure the viewers as well. I love it.
Oh, well, as I said, we are very, very proud of what we have achieved, and this comes out of the technology that's in our factory. All the Jensen speakers are made in Italy by Sika Altoparlanti. And Sika has been in the industry for about 40 years, and we have served companies like Roland Korg, L Acoustic, Deum Bay Technologies. I mean, everything from small loudspeakers for hi-fi, car audio, home keyboards, up to super high power subwoofers for the big line arrays for arenas. And so we have learned a lot, and we have learned a lot also from our customers who specified as very special units. And we kind of transferred a little bit of this technology to the world of the guitar speaker, which, on the other hand, is very, very conservative. We are all vintage fans at the end of the day. We all love a vintage amp or a vintage guitar. And so sometimes this limits the amount of technology you feel like putting into a new product because it's not how it was used to be.
Mm.
Sometimes it's a good thing because certain things were made perfect from day one. Let's say a Strat, like perfect from day one. Others, there's room to improve, and we felt we have done this.
Speaking of vintage and these sort of things, there's a lot of history to Jensen. Would you like to cover some of that?
Yeah, trying to keep things brief because I could talk for hours. Um, let's put it this way: the dynamic speaker as we know it, so a cone membrane, a voice coil, and a magnet, has been actually invented by Peter Jensen, who was a Danish engineer moved into the US. And he invented the principle of the dynamic speaker and actually made the first public demo of the Magnavox, which was the name given to this loudspeaker system, in the Golden Gate Park in San Francisco in 1915, which is actually more than a century ago. And from there, everything started.
No, a lot of
And
things happened since then.
oh, you bet so. And from there, everything started. The company focused mostly on sound reinforcement, PA, public address. And then came a certain guy named Leo Fender, of course, who kind of ignited the rock and roll industry, even if he didn't mean it at the time. And Jensen was already a pretty much established loudspeaker manufacturer, so it was kind of natural for them to use Jensen speakers into the first Tweed amps. And from the Tweed, we went on to the blondes and the browns and the blackface. And not only Jensen, of course, all the Chicago boys like Valco, Magneton, Silvertone, Supro, and not to mention Fender, Ampeg, Epiphone. Basically most, if not all, of the American amp manufacturer used Jensen as one of their key suppliers because the product was there, the technology was there, and the amp sounded the way they wanted. So it was kind of easy. And then the big tragedy, the big mistake from our side. Jensen wasn't part of the picture anymore when Fender was sold to CBS. CBS wasn't really interested. They had probably like other suppliers they wanted to work with, and so Jensen losing the biggest customer they had at the time, they simply lost interest into the music business and refocused on consumer electronics, which was the very wrong moment to do it because it was like mid of the 60s. So it was just 1 year before Hendrix, Cream, Clapton, Led Zeppelin, the Purple, Free, AC/DC, you name it. So like we completely lost this heritage, and the company just went off for many years until the late 80s, when looking at the market, I was working for the Jensen consumer electronic distributor at the time in Italy. Uh, we proposed them, since the industry was returning on the vintage thing. Fender was already selling the American vintage reissue, the 57 and the
Yep.
62, etc. So it was that amount, that time, that special time when the industry was kind of returning to the vintage quality. And we spoke with the Jensen management and said, look, we have this heritage, we have this potential to enter again into this market. Why not? So we got the license. We had the factory, which was SIC Altoparlanti at the time, that was already working for the consumer division of Jensen. and we started the venture, you know, rebuilding the history, and starting again selling to the market.
So what year was that?
It was very late 80s, but you'd say the official year when we introduced the vintage reissue series is 1990 at the Summer NAMM in Nashville.
Oh, okay.
That's the day.
Crikey. So it's even longer than I thought. That's
Oh yeah, 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 yeah.
That is absolutely crazy. So when you first started like headlining Jensen, as it were, and running them as a guitar speaker company again, you didn't have a lot of information. You didn't have all the data written down. You didn't have examples of the original, like crystal clean boxed examples of the speakers, did you?
We had nothing.
Yeah.
The company changed hands a few times before those days, and this archive was simply lost, was gone. So what we had to do was a really fun part, which was shopping on the market for vintage amps and vintage
Oh
speakers. And I tell
no.
you that, oh, such a terrible task. This little guy here, which is one of my favorite amps of all times. Uh, this the speaker that was into this amp was a P10R Alnico, which wasn't the original speaker for this amp, but we found it kind of the perfect P10R inside this one, and that became the model for the new generation to come. So there's lots of stories like this. So the fun part was buying stuff. The hard part was finding informations. So we spoke with a lot of former Jensen employees and engineers, and some of them, in the basement, they may have a carton box with some pieces of paper with some specifications or production charts. So we gradually reconstructed the supplier's history, the formulation of the cone membranes, what amount of cellulose, how many windings in the voice coil, all of those things. There are only two ways. One is you have information. The other one is destroying the speaker. There's no other way. So yeah, we made some damages. I tell you, we burnt a few of those.
And I suppose during that time, you that's when you started to discover. Obviously, you would have known a lot about speakers already, but then you started to discover. Well, hang on, this what they're saying here is wrong, and one of those things would have been about like relicing speakers, because relicing guitars and relicing amps, and people even relic pedals nowadays is kind of cool. But this myth about relicing speakers, I think is the first one you really wanted to pick up on, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's one of the points, because it was one of the discussions we went through at the very beginning of our venture. I wouldn't really speak about relicing or relicking. I would speak about aging.
Yeah.
Uh, Many asked us, why don't you give us an aged tone speaker? And the problem is, which tone are you talking about? Let me give you a very practical example. You take two Fender Deluxe Reverbs made in the same day in 1964. One has been living in an apartment in Arizona with 25% degrees of humidity and air conditioning for 50 years in the hand of a jazz player who played at bedroom level, apartment level. The other amp went into the blues club in New Orleans, played to death uh, every every day of the year in an 85% moisture in a smoky club, and maybe went even through the Catarina floods. Do you think that those two speakers will sound the same or measure the
Nope.
same? No
Not in a million
way.
years.
Uh, Not in a million years. So, when we bought 4, 5, 6, 10, 12 different examples of the same model, the problem was, which is the right one among these, which is the one that sounds correctly, that has been correctly aged. And it's nearly impossible. So you have to compromise, you have to find a good average, but you really don't know. You have to make assumptions. Uh, Fortunately enough, because for some of these speakers, we had the original information, so we could kind of measure and compare to the original specs. So we, in doing that, we kind of found a common path, a common degradation or evolution, if you call it that way. And that's how we reconstructed back the original specs when they were missing. Having said this, the problem is you simply don't know how a speaker is aged. You may know how a pickup can be aged because it simply loses the magnetization of the alnico
Mm.
bars. A speaker is not just a piece of alnico and some wires. There are moving parts. This is paper, and this will change its characteristics in function of the moisture. In fact, in if you blow smoke for 20 years, the smoke will deposit on the membrane and will make it heavier, which means less trebles. And dust will do the same, less trebles. Uh, the suspension will become softer and softer, and this means a looser tone. So, where exactly to stop? You don't really know. So, our final decision was to make the speaker as if they were new, like time capsule
Mm.
out of the production line back in those days. That's where we started.
It makes a lot of sense. It really does. So one of the things that I always remember about you is when we first met and we were having a chat, and you were telling me about the mismatch of the power from an amp to the power of the speaker. And people always say, "Oh, if you've got a 100 watt speaker and you need if you've got a 100 watt amp, you need a 100 watt speaker, and you can't have anything lower than that." And you were saying basically it's a load of rubbish. And and obviously it's true.
Did I say that?
I'm
Did I say
paraphrasing.
that?
You may have used harsher language, but
Oh, yeah.
yeah. So do you want to explain that for our listeners?
Yeah, sure. Let's put it this way. There's no reason in the world why a 5-watt amp cannot push or drive correctly a 100-watt speaker. The main difference is the power rating of an amp is what the amp is able to deliver. So he can deliver up to 10 watts. Let's put it that way. The power rating of a speaker is how much power it can take before burning out. So this speaker is rated at 40 watts. It can work with 0.5 to 1 to 10 to 20 to 30, even up to 40 watts without any specific problem. The guitar speakers are so lightweight and so sensitive that they need a very, very small amount of current and voltage to behave correctly. So there's not a single valid reason why. For helping the viewer, let me say this: a tube amp, full blast, everything on 10, Hendrix style. Let's say a Marshall 100 watt, everything on 10, Hendrix style, will not deliver 100 watts. It can deliver close to 180 or 190 with 40% of total harmonic distortion. So if you're a guy who regularly plays with the amp very high, very pushed, I would recommend to keep a relation of 1 to 2. So a 100-watt amp, a 200-watt cab, or 200-watt speaker. In most of the other situation, I think you will be safe running a 50-watt amp in a 60-watt speaker, no problem.
It's just the other way round. You wouldn't do it, is it? You wouldn't run like a 200 watt
Well,
amp into a 100 watt speaker, because that's where the problem lays. And I think that's where people get mixed up. They understand that there's that mismatch there and you can't do that, but they think it happens the other way round. And it's all about the headroom that the speaker's got. What you don't want to do is go over the top of it. It's
exactly. Of course, if you throw a 100 watt into a 10-watt speaker, it will blow. There's no question.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes sense when you explain it. You kind of sit there and go, well, of
Yeah.
course. Why don't we just understand that as per se? But I think there's so much information on the internet from people who claim to know what they're talking about and haven't got a clue, that turning around and talking to you about something like this is really, really handy.
Oh, well, happy to help.
This is kind of like why we ended up working together, really, isn't it? Because there is so much mystery around speakers. Because it's not like a guitar pedal, for instance, where like with a guitar pedal, you get something through and it's this size, you plug it in, and you either like it or you don't. And it's a case of a couple of plugs, a battery, or a power cable. With a speaker, people generally find a speaker that they like, and then they stick with that generally for the entirety of their playing career. And what we kind of wanted to do is give people that idea of like a playground where they can go in and test loads of different speakers against each other, and that's where TonePedia and Jensen came together really, really nicely, because we could give people the different sorts of playing styles. We could give people 24 different speakers, and you can sit there in your living room and go between them on your phone. You ideally don't use your phone, please do. If you're going to use headphones, but you can sit there on the toilet if you want and go through these speakers, whereas even if you went to a shop, you couldn't try this. So
No.
it was a big project. How much fun was it? Because I wasn't there, but did you enjoy it?
Oh, it was absolutely fun, and actually we learned a lot from that, because it doesn't really happen even to us in the factory to have all the speakers, each in its cab, and a switching system to listen to all of them in sequence. It's not every day happens that. It was absolutely fun. It was a hell of a work. We recorded close to 9,000 audio files, to put together all the combination with the different guitars, the different amps, the different microphones, different playing styles. But all in all, I think it's a fantastic tool. The point is, everybody who's watching us knows how much the sound of our voices will change if they change headphones or if they change their studio monitors. And the speaker is exactly the same. Some people say it's about 50% of your overall tone.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
But then, people keeps on changing guitars and pedals and amp, which is totally fine in my opinion, but they stick to the same speaker. I think they are missing out an enormous potential to develop new styles, new tones, new opportunities for their expression.
Yeah, I'm very lucky in my studio. I've got the ability to switch between 3 different types of speakers. Only 3, not 24 like we got on TonePedia, but 3 different types of speakers. And I completely agree with you. I do various different mixes of them to get that sort of idea and to understand what's going on. And I think that to some extent, that's why cab sims and companies like Two Notes and these sort of things have really grown in popularity, because people are starting to become aware of how important it is to have a speaker that suits your sound. And I suppose that's kind of where the Blackbird's kind of been born out of, because you can still get those vintage sounds, but it all work for the modern sounds as well.
Yeah, that was exactly the idea. And coming back to the TonePedia thing, it is pretty obvious that a 25-watt vintage Alnico 10-inch speaker was not meant to sound good with the lead channel of a dual rectifier. I would be very surprised if it would sound good. It sounds decent, but it is not what it was meant to be. But we needed that kind of consistency to give to the player a fixed reference point, like this is the amp or close to the amp that I'm using every day. And let me go through each and every speaker to understand which one fits and which one doesn't. Nobody makes a speaker that fits with everything or every genre and every style, So we wanted to give a tool.
No, to be fair to you, one of the things that really appealed to me about TonePedia when I first saw it, way before I joined the company, but one of the things that really appealed to me was TonePedia doesn't tell me this speaker is not for this amp, this pedal is not for this genre, this is this is that. It says, here it is, this is what it sounds like. And I guarantee there'll be someone out there who will listen to a vintage speaker through the Twin Rec, and they'll go, that is the sound for me. And where else are they going to get a chance to try that? They're just not.
Exactly.
So yeah, and
Yeah.
it's all real recording. So yeah,
Yeah.
and it's all relative to each other. Everything is consistent. We've created that fancy cab, so every speaker went into the same cab, regardless of size. It all fitted into a jig, so all the microphones are in the same place every time. Just consistency all the way through. And you guys did an amazing job with that. Well done.
Thank you.
So I want to ask you a little bit about speaker burn. So
Okay.
could you explain that for the viewers?
Of course. A speaker like this one has moving parts, you know, the suspensions. And I don't know if you can see this yellow part here,
Just
which is
yeah,
called the spider. The spider holds the voice coil in place while the suspension uh, connects the speaker to the outer ring of the basket. These two parts are very elastic. But you know, when the speaker comes out of the factory, these parts have been staying still in their natural position for maybe weeks or months. So they are not as compliant, which means flexible, as they were meant to be when they have been designed. These two parts are responsible for most of the tightness and dryness that you actually feel when you connect a brand new speaker and try to play through it. It is actually true. You know, just play it at a reasonable gigging level for maybe 20 or 30 hours, and the suspension will loosen up a little bit, the spider will loosen up a little bit, and everything will become more organic, more cohesive, more natural sounding. That's kind of the burn in process you really need to do. Just play the speaker through. I would not recommend to use artificial burn in processes if you don't know really well what you're doing, because it's very easy to overdo and it's very easy to permanently damage the speaker. One little example: the music, the guitar, generates transients. You know, the pick attack, there's a big spike in the waveform, then there's the decay, the intensity becomes smaller, and then there are some even milliseconds of silence between one note and the next one. These milliseconds are crucial for the voice coil to cool down and not to accumulate heat, which is the basic form of stress for a speaker. That's a natural way of playing and aging a speaker. If you put a constant tone, even at a relatively low volume, the voice coil will continue to move without any sort of interruption. It will never be able to cool down, and it will build up and build up heat up to the point of cooking itself, even with a relatively small signal. So you need to be very careful, and that's the reason why you need to have tools and measurements in place to understand what you're doing and why you are overdoing. So that's the main reason why we do not recommend artificial or forced breaking in or aging techniques. Just play it. Let's say try to live with the speaker for the first 20, 30 hours, and then the speaker will do the good for you.
Yeah, and that 20 to 30 hours, if you're buying a decent speaker, you should be playing that in no time. That should pass really quick.
Yeah, it's not that long.
So it sounds like a long time that you're thinking of an entire 30 hours lined up in one go, but you don't do it like that. It'll only take you a couple of weeks, say a month at most,
And,
and you'll be well through it before you know. Uh,
and that speaker will not be overcooked.
mm,
That speaker will stay with you for a long time. So that's what we want.
yeah, you'll probably get like double, triple the lifespan out of it than you would if you went and did this burning in, which is going to fast forward the process by maybe a month, but last three times as less. So yeah, it's not worth it.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, if you overdo it, it actually lasts
Yeah,
zero.
go straight away. So,
Yeah, exactly.
absolutely mad. So okay, so that is speaker burning. But what about speaker breakup? Because this is another sort of for me this is stupid, if I'm honest. you know, you hear all these stories about how the Kinks kind of got their overdrive time by like using razor blades on their speakers and these sort of things. You're thinking, is that true? I don't know whether that's true or just some sort of urban myth. But your breakup happens either in a pedal, and you artificially send it into the amp, or it happens in the preamp, or it happens in the power amp, which is where you get the sweetest sort of overdrives, obviously, power amp distortion. But it does not happen in the speaker. If it is, that's not good news. So that's my take on it. Is that right?
It's very right, but I can understand why the common perception tends to relate to speaker breakup as a good thing. Let's put it from a technical standpoint. Speakers are, in spite of being a very old technology, they are pretty decent linear devices, which means that from minimum volume to up to pretty close to their physical limit, they behave kind of linear. They don't generate significantly measurable and audible distortion or compression. Maybe a little bit of dynamic compression, especially the Alnico and the neodymium ones. The ceramic doesn't even compress, even when it's actually smoking. Uh,
You tested that, have you?
oh yeah, we did it. Guilty. But to be fairly honest, when you hear the distortion of the speaker, it means you already went too far. You have already destroyed it or damaged it. But I can understand from the player perspective, because the distortion may happen in the amp, may happen in the pedal, may happen in the preamp, but especially in single channel amps, most of the overdrive and distortion happens between the phase inverter being driven hard and that where the maximum compression and sweet sponginess of the tone happens, and in the power amp tubes and output transformers. Uh, the speaker, I also accept the concept that sounds much better above a certain volume. No speaker, including ours, no speaker sounds good at bedroom level.
No.
No way. Simply because they don't push enough air. But if you drive them correctly at a reasonable level, you will feel the air against your chest again. You will be flapping your pants. And that's when you really are in the sweet spot. When you are in the zone, when the amp sounds good because it's correctly driven, and the speaker is moving sufficient air to give you that kind of tone, that kind of feeling. But honestly, the speaker is not really distorting at that time. It's not breaking up. When it breaks up, it's not pleasant to
No,
hear.
no, it's not. I've heard that, and it is kind of like, ooh, what's going on?
Yeah.
Honest, my top advice is if you want something, if you want it to sound like you think it's going to sound, don't look at the end of the chain. Look at the start of the chain. Go and get yourself a pedal to do it, because there's a million different pedals for a million different sounds, and I'm sure some sort of dirty gated fuzz will get you close to speaker breakup. It's
Totally.
right. So look, as always, it's been lovely to see you again. So we're going to tell the lovely viewers how they can win the Blackbird 40. Would you like to do the honours?
I can do it. So you need to be very focused on what we have said, and there's two questions. The first question is, which is the name of the first Jensen loudspeaker presented by Peter Jensen at the Golden Gate Park? That name. The second question is the year when Jensen returned on the market. That we presented ourselves at the Nashville Summer NAMM. The exact year. That's the second question.
Well, all that information is in the interview that you've just watched, so you might have to do a bit of rewinding and that sort of thing. But other than that, we will see you for the other interviews we're doing for this. And Ignazio, it's been lovely to have you on. I'm going to say goodbye, and you, sir.
And goodbye, everybody, and stay tuned. There's more from us coming in the next months. So keep rocking.
Exciting. Right. I'll see you all soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.